My son called me crying. He said he had no way to pay the mortgage, and I told him I couldn't help him. And 3 days later, I bought my new metallic green Rolls-Royce. But stick around, because in the end, you'll understand me. And that, honestly, doesn't keep me up at night anymore, bitches. I'm 73 years old. I've been divorced for 42 years. I own properties in 4 countries, businesses that generate more money than I can spend. And I live alone in a house I designed myself, where I answer to no one. I didn't get here through inheritance. I didn't get here through a husband. I got here because for decades I did things other people weren't willing to do, and I paid prices other people weren't willing to pay. That matters. Because what I'm about to tell you is not a story about money. It's a story about what happens to a woman when money becomes her only accepted identity within her own family. And that took me years to see clearly. The phone rang on a Tuesday afternoon. It was my son, 44 years old, a decent man at heart, but with a history of decisions that always seemed to end in a call to me. This time, it was the mortgage. 2 months behind. His wife had lost her job. He said they needed $80,000. He said that if I didn't do something, they were going to lose the house where my grandchildren lived. And here's the part nobody understands without the full story. I had that money. I had it available that same day. It wasn't a sacrifice. $80,000 was not going to change my life in any meaningful way whatsoever. So why did I say no? Wait, because to understand that, you need to understand who I was 10 years before that call. For nearly 3 decades, I was my family's financial safety net. Not metaphorically, literally. My oldest son needed capital for a business. I put up the money. My daughter wanted to study abroad. I paid. My ex-husband, yes, the same man who left me with 2 children and a debt that took me years to pay off, called me once asking for help with his medical bills. And I paid. I paid for the education. I paid for the emergencies. I paid for other people's mistakes. I paid for weddings, divorces, businesses that failed, cars that got wrecked, projects that never got off the ground. And during all of that time, my family loved me. They called often. They included me in everything. I was important. I was the one who fixed things. I was the one who showed up. What I didn't understand then is that they didn't love me. They loved what I represented. And that distinction changes everything. There's a moment I've never told anyone until now. It was at my oldest granddaughter's birthday dinner. She was turning 7. The whole family gathered around the table. My son made a toast. He talked about how grateful they all were, about how much it meant to have me in their lives. And in that moment, while everyone raised their glasses, I realized that what was being toasted wasn't me. It was my money. It was what I had done for them. It was the version of me that was useful, that didn't ask questions, that showed up when called, that signed when there was something to sign. But Margaret, the woman who was 70 years old, who had built all of this from nothing, who had survived things that would have destroyed someone less stubborn, she wasn't in that toast. Nobody mentioned her. And that night, driving home, I thought something that unsettled me deeply. If tomorrow I had nothing, how many of these phones would still ring? I didn't answer that question then, but I kept it. Back to the call with my son. What I didn't tell you is that it wasn't the first time. 4 years earlier, I had put money into saving that same business that eventually collapsed anyway. 2 years before that, I had paid off a credit card debt. Because he told me that if I didn't, it would affect the kids. Every time I paid, every time the problem temporarily disappeared, every time, nothing changed. And the most disturbing part wasn't the money. It was that my son had never truly had to face the consequences of his own decisions. Because I always arrived before that could happen. I wasn't his mother anymore. I had become his safety net. And safety nets don't teach you how to walk. They teach you how to fall without fear. So that afternoon, when I heard his voice on the phone, I heard something I had never heard before. Not because it was new, but because for the first time I was willing to listen. I heard a 44-year-old man who still didn't know what happened when Mom didn't show up. And I said, "I can't help you this time." I didn't say I didn't want to. I said I couldn't. Yes, I know. That's the part that still bothers me about myself, that I wasn't completely honest in that moment. Because I could. I chose not to. What came next was exactly what I expected. My son hung up on me. My daughter-in-law sent a message I won't repeat here, but which made very clear what she thought of me. My daughter called 2 days later to tell me how could I, that the children were suffering, that I had changed, that money had made me cold. Money had made me cold. That phrase circled in my head for days, because what my family called warmth for years had simply been my financial availability. And the moment that availability disappeared, suddenly I was cold. Suddenly I had changed. I hadn't changed. They were simply seeing me for the first time without a check in my hand. The Rolls-Royce. 3 days after that call, I went to the dealership. It wasn't planned. It wasn't an act of anger. It was something quieter than that, which is exactly why it took me a while to understand it. I had been looking at that car online for months. Green. That specific green I always wear, which for me isn't a fashion choice, but a constant reminder of what I built and what I will not allow anyone to take from me. And that day, I walked in, drove it, and bought it. While I was signing the papers, the saleswoman asked if it was for a special occasion. I told her yes, for me. I didn't say it with arrogance. I said it with the same calm I use for anything that's simply true. That car was not a response to my family. It was not a declaration of war. It was something more private than that. It was the first time in many years that I spent a significant amount of money exclusively on myself, with no one else in the equation. No guilt, no justification, no asking anyone's permission. Here's the part that changed how I understand this entire story. A few months later, when things had settled somewhat, I had a long conversation with my daughter. Not exactly a reconciliation, an honesty, and she said something that hit me hard. "Mom, we grew up believing that your way of loving us was giving us what we needed." And she was right. They learned that from me. I taught them, without meaning to, that love is demonstrated by fixing things, that being present means being financially available, that a mother who says no is failing. They didn't learn that on their own. I built it, transaction by transaction, over 30 years. And that weighs on me. That genuinely weighs on me. But what I also learned is that recognizing an error doesn't mean returning to the pattern that caused it. Remorse is not a reason to continue causing harm in a different form, because keep paying for every crisis was not going to repair what I had built. It was only going to bury it deeper. My son eventually found a way to save the house. I don't know exactly how. I know they sold a car. I know they renegotiated with the bank. I know they figured it out without me. And that doesn't make me happy. There's no satisfaction in that. But there is something important. They could. When they had no other option, they could. That's what I had never let them discover. There's something people don't understand about having money. Something nobody tells you because it sounds arrogant to say. When you have a lot, you become a resource. Not to everyone, not always, but within certain dynamics, especially family ones. You stop being a person and start being a function. The one who fixes things. The one who shows up. The one who can't say no because she has the means to say yes. And the irony is that the more you give from that place, the more is expected, not because your family are necessarily bad people, but because human systems tend to stabilize around what works. And if what works is you absorbing every problem, that becomes the system. Breaking that system hurts. It hurts everyone, even the one who breaks it. The Rolls-Royce is sitting in my garage right now, green, gleaming. Absolutely ridiculous for a 73-year-old woman who lives alone in a city where she could take a taxi for the rest of her life without a single practical problem. I know. But every time I see it, I'm reminded of something it took me far too long to learn. The money you don't spend on yourself doesn't stay saved. It leaves anyway. It goes toward other people's emergencies. It goes toward guilt that was never yours to carry. It goes toward relationships where your value is tied to your bank account. That car is the first one I ever bought without asking myself whether someone else needed it more than I did. And damn it, I should have done it sooner. I don't know if I did the right thing. Honestly, I don't know if there is a right answer to any of this. What I know is that I spent decades being indispensable to people who never learned not to need me. And the day I stopped being that, they called me cold, distant, changed. Maybe I did change. Or maybe I simply stopped disappearing into the role others had decided I was supposed to fill. The question I ask myself sometimes, and that I'll leave with you, is this: how much of what you give is really love, when the other person has never had to live without receiving it? And the other one, which is even more uncomfortable: who are you when you stop being useful to the people you say you love? It took me 73 years to begin answering those questions. I hope you don't need as long.